What's up, everybody? Welcome to Hammerdown Motorsports. My name is Steve Fast. I hope you guys are having an amazing day. It is a nice warm day out here in Pennsylvania, so I'm so happy that we're actually sort of getting spring weather, not this cold and rainy weather that we've been having. But behind me, we do have our 2019 Ram Laramie Sport, and we're going to be putting on some amp research power steps today. So it's finally time we actually get this done, because I've had the boxes sitting over here for a little while now, and I've been using this truck, getting in and out of it, wishing I had these steps installed. So it's time to just get this thing done and get this all installed and show you guys exactly what it takes to do this on this truck. But before we get into all of that, we do have some new additions to the shop. I was at an auction about 2 weeks ago, and I got this table here for about $5, which was an absolute steal. Actually, it had a piece of wood on the top of it, and I think people may have thought it was a wooden table, but obviously I went and checked out everything at the auction. It was just a piece of plywood sitting on top, and I removed that, threw that away, and now we have a nice solid steel table that really hasn't been beat on too hard, because this was actually in the body shop from a Ford dealership. And also from that same auction, we did get another work table over here, and the best part about this table is this massive vise that came with it. And this table probably is worth about 75, maybe $100. And with this vise, it ended up being almost $500. Somebody else really wanted it, but I wanted it more and ended up getting it. So this vise is gonna be a huge addition to the shop. As you can see, the size of it from here, the size of my hand, will go over here to the one I was using. You can see there's a very, very big difference between this one and that one. This one costs about $60 from the hardware store. These ones, this is a pretty old one. I mean, this is probably from maybe the 60s or something like that. It's an old Colombian. And it is one heavy duty piece of iron. I can't wait to be using this more and more in the shop. Already just the small things that I've done with it, it's made things so much easier. I do have a part of our step in here as well. I just kind of got one of the motors sort of in place. I'm going to torque these, but I just kind of wanted to get everything lined up and everything like that. So the vise worked out really, really well to hold that in place. Also over here, big news for the shop, we have our own tire machine. Now, I know it says Ford on it because it was from the Ford dealership, but this is a very, very well-rounded machine. It is a little bit old school, but this machine is actually made by Coates, and anybody who knows anything about tire machines, Coates is one of the biggest names in the industry. And this particular model is very, very simple. It has an electric table. There's 2 air cylinders in it, and that's pretty much it. Everything seems to be in really good working order. There's a tiny little bit of an air leak on the one cylinder on the table, but it doesn't affect its operation. And I do have a seal kit, so I'm going to be taking this apart and getting this all fixed up. But not having to go to the tire shop is going to be absolutely life-changing. I hate going to the tire shop and waiting 2 hours for a job that I could just do at home now. So this is going to be an absolute amazing addition to the shop. Also coming up very soon, we will be doing an install on this underglow kit. I've got it all unboxed, ready to go. Just need to be able to get a little bit of time so we can get that all put together and ready to go for the vehicle that it's going on. Maybe it's going on this one, maybe it's going on that one. I don't know, drop in the comments. Which one should I put the underglow kit on? So now that you guys are all up to date on what's going on over here in the Hammerdown Motorsports Garage, let's get what you guys came here for, get started on this power step kit. So now let's open up our instruction booklet and let's see what step 1 is, and let's get this whole thing installed. So as for step 1 of the instructions, they do have this harness relocation bracket that has to go on the truck. It is on the front left side, so let's get this truck raised up and we can get that part removed. So this is the front bracket they're referring to in the instructions, and we're going to take the 10mm bolts out, remove this bracket, and replace it with the supplied one. So now that the bolts are removed from the truck, I was able to just kind of wiggle the little push pin here that's attached to the harness out of the original bracket, and we can set that aside because we're not going to need that one anymore. And then we're ready to install the supplied bracket. One thing I did notice about installing this bracket is the top wire right here that goes kind of up to the front. It has this little anchor right here for this wire, and it goes into a hole right here. And the thing is with this, if you install the bracket without removing this, it does put a little bit of a strain on that harness. So what I wanted to do is just take that off. We'll put this all in place. Everything is sitting up here nicely. There's no wires being pulled on or anything like that. And I'm going to try to kind of move this anchor down this harness so I can get it back into this factory hole. So now you can see I got this anchor moved back. We're back into the factory hole. One thing I did notice is this part of the wiring harness is a little bit close to this metal corner, and it's not really a sharp edge or anything like that, but just as things move on the truck, I really don't want anything to rub through. So I got some of this 3/4 inch wire loom. I'm just gonna kind of slip that over and give it a little bit of an added protection. And there we go, we got our loom in place. We got a couple zip ties on there to hold that in place, and we're not gonna have to worry about this ever rubbing through on that metal bracket. So next up, we're gonna be locating our mounting points for our motor and our idler. Right here we have the 3 studs in the front. It does have a set of 3 in the middle. We're not gonna need those. That's probably for the factory running boards. And then we have our one for our idler in the rear. So now we're gonna grab our motor, idler, and hardware, get those installed, and we're gonna torque those to 16 foot-pounds or 22 Newton meters. So as I'm doing the driver's side, I'm also putting on the passenger side as well. Everything is exactly the same over here. Get our torque wrench in here. I pretty much just tighten these up with the electric ratchet, which doesn't go too crazy tight. As you can see, I can still get a couple of turns before it torques. So everything is working pretty well that way. One thing to keep in mind when installing these, you want to make sure you don't have a big buildup of paint, especially on the bottom studs. That can happen. They do recommend using a wire wheel if you do have that on your truck. Kind of clean up those threads so you don't have any problems installing the nuts. So next up, we're going to install our motors and torque them down to the front bracket assemblies before we install them on the truck. We're going to put these at 36 inch-pounds. Not too much torque. Just make sure that everything is nicely torqued evenly, and you should have no problems with the gear operation or any issues in the future. All right, we got our driver's side front motor installed onto the bracket gear assembly. It's time to install this side. We'll get our other side torqued up, ready to go as well. Get these installed on the truck. So I got a little ahead of myself, and I wasn't thinking when I installed this motor that I didn't put it in the correct position to install the boards, which is going to be the open position. So now I've got this halfway in the upright position, and I got to remove the motor to be able to push this down into the proper position. So now we got to retorque that all over again. All right, crisis averted. We do have our bracket in the correct position, and we have our motor reinstalled and retorqued. Now this bolt or nut right here is a little bit tricky because you can't get a socket on it. You got to use a wrench. So if you're going to torque this one, you can use a torque adapter or a crowfoot, something that you're able to just get onto the nut itself without actually having to go up over top of it because the motor assembly is in the way. But either way, you can just give this a good tighten with a wrench if you don't have those tools available to you. But all in all, we'll get this thing torqued down and we're on to the next step. All right, we got our idler and we got our front motor assembly installed on both sides. It's time to get the boards and get those installed. So now installing the boards is pretty simple. You have a T-nut that's kind of up here in the back in a track. And what you want to do is just put one of your bolts in there, and you can slide this back and forth, and you're going to line it up with the holes in your bracket. Now on the front of the board, which we can't exactly give you a good example of at the moment, because as you can see, our lift is in the way of where these boards are going to sit onto the brackets. But what you're going to want to do is the front of this board is going to be 7.5 inches from the front to the bracket. So what you want to do is get this in a position, measure that distance from your bracket to the end of your board on the front, 7.5 inches, and then you're able to tighten it all down. So I thought this job was going to be a whole lot easier doing this on the lift. Unfortunately, with our hoist arm the way it is, it's not going to allow us to put the boards on at this time. I'm going to skip over to the electrical portion, which is the next thing after getting your boards installed. And we're going to get all the electrical done underneath the truck here, nice and easy, so I don't have to crawl around, because once I put this board in place, I'm not going to be able to put it on the lift until we're able to retract them electrically. So let's get the electrical portion handled, and then we can install our boards afterwards. So next up, grab the smallest knife you can find, and we're going to open up our controller and we'll get that attached to the harness. So here you'll see on our controller, we do have some pins that are different than the other. Some of them have a little semicircle on it, and you basically just want to go look on your harness, make sure that you have the correct matching pins going into the right holes on the controller, because I think there is a way that you can do this wrong, but just make sure that you have the right ones going to the right spot. All right, we got our wiring harness laid out here. As you can see, we do have the ground right here. We've got our fused power side right there, and then we've got 2 legs that are going to go down either side. We've got a longer section over there, which is actually going to go across the back of the firewall and then go down the wheel well and then out to our boards on the passenger side. And then this one right here is going to go down the driver's side and then obviously down to our boards on the driver's side of the vehicle. And then this is going to connect to our OBD2 port adapter that is included in the kit as well. So as per the instructions, you place your module here on this wiring behind the battery. Then they give you some 11-inch zip ties. You just put that around the module and zip tie it to your existing wiring. I'm not really crazy about the way that looks, but I think that's really kind of our only option at this point. All right, we've got our wiring loosely in place. This is the passenger side. I've got it kind of over here by the splash guard, and you want to keep it away from your exhaust. You don't want anything getting melted or anything like that. And then I basically just routed it over here on top of this cab mount and ran our plug over to our passenger side motor. And then the harness continues over this way. Basically just run everything up and on top here out of the way. Obviously we are going to tie all this down with the supplied zip ties. Over on the driver's side is a little more crowded, but basically the same idea. We've got our harness right here. This is our splash guard. We basically just went up over top of this mount as well, and then plugged in our motor, and then continued our harness along the top parts of the frame. And these are actually going to be where our lights are going to hook up, so these wires basically stop where they're supposed to. Now we're going to go up to the top, make sure that everything has enough slack before we start zip tying everything down. So as I'm tying up the wiring harness, I'm just using existing holes on the frame, kind of in the orientation where I want this harness to go. But one thing I did find that was a little bit tricky is if you have a small hole on one side and on the other, it's really hard to get a zip tie in one side and to come out the other. So what I did is I took this piece of copper. This is just from our electrical work that we're doing here in the shop. This is just a piece that was extra, and I just kind of made this little loop on the end. And what I'm able to do is just stick that through the larger of the holes, and then I'll grab the zip tie with the hook and just pull it through the hole. Actually worked pretty good. All right, so we got our harness nicely zip tied and in place. Now it's time for the task of drilling holes in our brand new $60,000 truck. So what you're going to want to do is take your tape measure. You're going to want to measure from the back bracket 8 inches forward, and then just make a mark so you know where you're going to be. My truck's nice and dirty, so I just took my finger and kind of rubbed this spot right here so I know where I'm going to drill. And the front, you're going to go from 7 inches back from this bracket over here, and I did the exact same thing. And we're going to start out with an 1/8 inch drill bit, drill our pilot hole, and then we're going to go to a 9/32 for our final hole. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to take some touch-up paint. I'm going to fill the hole up with that to make sure that that is nice and rust protected. I don't want to have rust starting on this truck ever if I can, so we're going to definitely take care of that, make sure everything is nice and protected. So we're going to go start drilling and get these new lights put over top of our boards. So now that we got our holes drilled, I have the grommet in place. You're going to end up with something like this. So now that we got our area all nicely cleaned up and degreased, I'm going to use some of this Sika activator. This stuff works really, really well if you want to get two-sided tape to stick for a very long time. What I do is I just take a Q-tip and a little bit of this, and I just kind of wipe it on the area where the two-sided tape is going to meet the paint, and then I let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes, let it dry, and then when you put your two-sided tape on that area, it sticks about 3 times as well as it would just by putting the tape on there by itself. All right, we got all of our lights in place. Two-sided tape has definitely got a good adhesion, so that's not gonna have any issues with falling off. We do have our butt connectors installed. These are the crimp style butt connectors with a heat shrink exterior. So you just take your heat gun. This is a heat gun I got from Harbor Freight. It was probably about $12 and definitely a good investment. And then we just heat these up until they shrink over the wires and we have a nice weather tight connection. So now that our connectors are all nicely watertight, I went an extra step. This is just kind of a personal preference for me. I put a little bit of loom over top, and then I went from end to end with some electrical tape just to make sure that this has a little bit of extra protection. And then when you go underneath the vehicle, you're not going to see the butt connectors and just the wires hanging there. And if you have a bunch of mud or anything like that hitting this thing, you're not going to end up having anything happen to your wires. Just gives you that little bit of an extra layer of protection. All right, I think we've done everything we can with the truck up here on the lift. I'm going to lower it down now. We can install our boards and finish off our wiring up top, and I think we're about to wrap this thing up. So next up, we're going to be getting these 2 wires inside the cab through the firewall, and it shows in the instructions where to go through. There's a little grommet that's actually on the left side of the steering shaft, and you can't really see it with all this stuff kind of in the way. So we're going to access that from the inside of the cab. And what I did was actually make a homemade fish so I can put a hole in that grommet, stick this piece up through inside the engine compartment, and then what I'm going to do is tie up the wires to the end of this, and then I can just pull it through into the cab. Now this is nice and rigid, so I can kind of bend it whichever way I need to. All it is a piece of that copper like I used earlier. I took a long piece, I kind of doubled it over, stuck one end in the vise, stuck a screwdriver on the other end, and just twisted it up, and it gives you something just like this. So we're gonna take you guys underneath the dash and kind of show you where we're gonna gain access. We got this guy right here. We're gonna lift it up and you're gonna see a grommet behind it. Now what you're gonna wanna do is just take a pick and just kind of make a small hole just so you have enough room to get your wires through. And what we're gonna do is put our fish through that hole, and then we're gonna see it underneath the engine compartment, and we're able to tie our wires to it and just pull the fish back through here, and then we'll have our purple wires inside the cab. So this is the access panel I was talking about. There's no screws or anything, it's just clips. I just use an interior tool to pop that off. And then we go over to the side of the dash here. We see the little green receptacle right there. You can feel it with your finger. This is where that little white connector is gonna end up going into. And then all we have to do is hook up these two purple wires, make everything nice and tidy underneath so we're not gonna hit that with our feet, zip tie everything up out of the way. And that's all there is to putting the pass-through harness in. All right, we have our first board in place. Just got the bolts started. Got my torque wrench here. We're gonna torque these to 10 foot-pounds. And then we're gonna move around to the other side. We just wanna make sure before we tighten them down that we have the right distance from the front of this front bracket to the end of our board. And that's supposed to be 7.5 inches. All right, everybody, we have our boards in the upright position. We have our power hooked up. Our OBD2 is hooked up. As soon as I hooked up power, I did not have the OBD2 port plugged in. I just hooked up our power and ground. As soon as I hooked those up, those boards went up. So just keep that in mind so you don't have any tools or anything laying on them when you hook up your power, because they will go into the upright position automatically. So question is, how do they work? We open our door and there they are. Lights are working awesome. You got a nice blue kind of looking LED, almost like a purple even. But we're gonna have to turn off the lights in the shop here so you guys can see what they look like in the dark. Let's get these mezzanine lights off and we are in the pitch black. Got my little light here on the bench so I can see where I'm going. You can see this is the light actually from underneath the mirror, which really lights up this whole area at night, which is really nice. But now with our amp steps, look at that. This is amazing. Look at how much light this thing throws. So we've got more like our purple bluish light, and then we've got our white light from our mirror. And you can definitely see everywhere where you need to see to get into the truck. And these things are super low. This is my ankle. Pretty much is just above where my ankle is. That's how low these things are. So you take a very small step and you can get up into the seat without having to rub on the bolster whatsoever. Definitely a 150% upgrade from having your standard Nerf bar steps, because when these steps go up into the truck, you barely even notice that they're there and you don't lose any ground clearance. We can see a little bit more with the shop lights on. And as you can see, it looks like they're supposed to be there. Honestly, you wouldn't even know that they're there if you just saw this truck parked for the first time. Now when we open our door, there they come. Close the door, wait a second, and up they go. Everything working as it should. Well, everybody, that was our installation of the amp power steps for the 2019 Ram 1500 Laramie. They work absolutely amazing. The install was actually not too bad at all. I thought there was gonna be a lot more to it. I thought there was gonna be rib nuts and all that kind of stuff. But as you saw, everything was pretty much already under the truck, and the kit just uses what the factory would have used when they put on their power steps and all that kind of good stuff. Basically, the hardest thing is just getting the wiring where you want it. Make sure that you have everything tied up where you need it to be, and just take that little bit of extra time to make sure you have a really quality install, and everything should work for a long time to come. So if you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit your post notification bell. Make sure you don't miss any upcoming videos. We have plenty more to come with this truck, that car, four-wheelers, and pretty much everything that's going on in this absolute fantasy factory that we are building here. We are gonna be doing so much more. I can't wait to get started. We have a lift kit for the second gen. We've got all kinds of stuff. I've got parts that I've had for years, just never had the time or the place to put it all together, but we're gonna be getting it done now. We're gonna be knocking these projects out, going out and playing with them, having fun, showing you guys along the way how we build them and everything like that. So I can't wait to take you guys along for the ride. So as always, keep that hammer down.